Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Lunch Bunch with Dr. Judy. I'm glad you've joined us today. It's always nice to know there's people out there actually listening to me. I'm Dr. Judy Pierson. If you don't know me, I'm a licensed psychologist here in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. And this program is offered to you by Delaware Hospice. I obviously work part-time for Delaware Hospice as well. And these monthly programs are part of their ongoing commitment to community education. They happen the first Friday of every month. I'll tell you what we're going to be talking about next month. We're going to be talking about decluttering. This is a topic many people relate to. So it's going to be next Friday, Friday, May 7th from 12:30 to 1:30. Decluttering, managing your things so they don't manage you. If you feel your things are managing you rather than you managing them, you're not alone. The storage facility industry is worth over $40 billion today. The average American spends a year of their life looking for misplaced items, a year of their life looking for misplaced items. Almost 1/4 of adults pay late fees on bills because they have misplaced their statements. And according to the National Soap and Detergent Association, who knew there was such a thing, ridding clutter could eliminate about 40% of your housework in the average home. The good news is that about 80% of the clutter in our homes and offices is due to disorganization, not lack of space. And 80% of what we keep, we never use. So why is this good news? Well, because almost anyone can significantly cut their clutter in their lives by just getting organized and letting go of things they really aren't even using. Get a fresh start on your life. Come learn how to overcome the emotional blocks to letting go of stuff and acquire some strategies for eliminating clutter from your life forever. I think this is a fairly universal topic, or the industry of storage would not be so wealthy. I think it's worth more than Hollywood these days. So that tells you that you are not alone. Now, if you're not on my mailing list or on a mailing list to get updates on our topics and the links to our topics, or you'd like a copy of the handout today and you haven't gotten it, you can write to either my boss, Sandra Satterfield, and Terrence is going to put these email addresses up on the screen so you can see them. Sandra Satterfield, it is just her first initial S, and then Satterfield, Satterfield at Delaware Hospice. Okay. I guess it won't come. So S. Satterfield at DelawareHospice.org, or you can write to me, Judith Pierson, all small letters, JUDITH PIERSON at Juno, JUNO.com. And I'll be sure that you get updates on our next talk and the handout and links to the upcoming presentations. I got interested in this idea of how to make change in life because I'm in the business of change, and I probably find it as hard as everybody else to make change. And so when I didn't stumble upon it. A wonderful person sent me an article. Deb sent me an article about a woman who decided she wanted to start running again. And I'll tell more of her story at the end. I'll be quoting from her article, but she decided she wanted to start running again. So of course, what does she do? She decides she has to start right out of the gate to train for a half marathon. And of course, within 2 weeks of a very rigorous running schedule, she quits running altogether. And I think that's pretty typical of most of us. New Year's resolutions, we have big goals, and we fail within a matter of weeks, if not days. So this article really stumbled upon the idea of doing a little bit less, a little bit more than nothing as a way to get yourself started in making changes. And I thought, this is realistic. This is something people can really do if they want to make changes in their lives. Now, I'm going to go into this in more detail, but the basic idea behind it is that behaviors become habits. And habits are things that you just do automatically without even thinking about it, like brushing your teeth every morning. When behaviors become habits, they become so automatic that they're very easy to do. And so the idea is, if you start with a very small step in the direction you want to go and you do it every single day, and it's so easy, you can do it every single day, you'll start laying down neural pathways in your brain that will start to transform that behavior into a habit. And then it's much easier to expand that if you want to create some changes in your life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I just want you to know the whole concept behind this is it is easy to make change if you make it in small ways and build on those small ways. And so I just think it's a much more humane and apparently a much more effective way to actually make change in your life. So I thought it would be really good to share that with you. Most of these strategies, I didn't come up with them. They after I read this article, I went looking to see if anybody had written more about this, and I found 2 books. One is called Mini Habits, Smaller Habits, Bigger Results by Stephen Guise. And again, this will be on your handout, but it's Mini Habits, Smaller Habits, Bigger Results. And the other one is Tiny Habits, the small changes that change everything. And that's by B.J. Fogg, Fogg. So a lot of these ideas are coming from those two books. So why is it so hard to make positive changes? Everybody wants to make them. We all start out with good intentions. How come it's so hard? Well, it turns out that the habits we already do on a regular basis are wired into our brains because we do them so often that they're really deeply wired in our brains. So bad habits are hard to change because they're also deeply wired in our brains. And so research suggests that anywhere from 50% to 95% of the things we do on a daily basis are actually habitual. They're things that we do without thinking. They've become habits. They've become so routine we don't even have to think about them. And that's the good, the bad, and the ugly, the habits we don't like as well as the good habits. So if you think about it, I know I get up every morning. The first thing I do is I put my CPAP machine in something that's going to clean it, and I brush my teeth and I take a shower. And we all have those kind of rituals that we follow every day. And those are the things that are habits that we don't even have to really think about. So habits are things that are performed in a sort of non-deliberate, relatively thoughtless manner. And what we want to do is create habits that are good habits that are just as easy to perform on a regular basis. So behaviors that are repeated result in well-worn neural pathways in the brain. What do I mean by that? And I'm quoting now from Judy, who is a certified diabetes educator, wrote an article about this. She said neural pathways are comprised of neurons connected by dendrites, and they're created in the brain based on our habits and our behaviors. The number of dendrites increases with the frequency a behavior is performed. I picture these neural pathways as deep grooves or roads in our brain. Our brain cells communicate with each other via a process called neural firing. Psychologist Dina Ware, she says, explains that when brain cells communicate frequently, the connection between them strengthens, and the message that travels the same pathway in the brain over and over begins to transmit faster and faster. With enough repetition, these behaviors become automatic. Reading, driving, and riding a bike are examples of complicated behaviors that we do automatically because of neural pathways that have been formed. So think of neural pathways as like well-run pathways in your brain. It's very easy for them to just fire down the line, and you do all the things necessary to perform those tasks, such as driving, even complicated processes, because you do them so often that they really lay down a pathway in your brain that's very simple for the firing of the neurons to just go right straight down the path, and you're doing the things that you have to do, and you're not even really having to think about it. So one thing you want to keep in mind is the good news about doing something small, even if it's small, but you're doing it every day, it's laying down a neural pathway. It's turning a behavior into a habit because it's laying down that neural pathway. Repetition is what really creates lasting change. So repetition of something small is a step in that right direction and will be easy then to build on a regular basis. I'm going to give this to Susan in case this is somebody who can't get on. Sorry, if somebody's out there and they're stuck and they can't get on, I want us to be able to answer their questions. When we experience stress and when decision making is difficult, we're even more likely to fall back on those habitual behaviors, whether those behaviors are helpful or not. And so, unfortunately, for many of us, we have very well wired, not so helpful habits, such as eating when we're under stress or, other things that aren't helpful. So what you really want to do is create habits that are so laid down in the brain that when you're under stress, you don't have to think about it. You'll just do them. There are two other parts of the brain that really influence habits. They are the basal ganglia and the prefrontal cortex. And now I'm quoting from Stephen Guise. The basal ganglia is tasked with performing our repetitive behaviors so that we hardly think about them. The more we repeat a habit, the record of it in our basal ganglia becomes stronger and stronger. Unfortunately, the basal ganglia is often so strong it can overpower other parts of the brain that are capable of making conscious and more reasoned decisions. That's the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. So it's like the thinking part of the brain. The prefrontal cortex allows us to consider things like the long-term consequences. So if I keep drinking every night as a way to cope, that's going to begin to interfere with my life. Prefrontal cortex, part of your brain that can do the thinking and conscious decision making. It allows us to focus our attention, it regulates impulse control, and it makes plans for the future. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that can kind of say, I'm not going to eat 10 more pieces of chocolate because it's not really what I want to do. It's not going to be good for me. Here's the problem with the prefrontal cortex. It has one liability. It tires very easily. I like to say that if we were just little brains and you could just do things based on whether they were rational or not, we'd be pretty boring because we'd kind of be little computers. And I don't think that'd be such a good thing. But here's the reality. Sometimes you really want to draw on that prefrontal cortex, but sometimes it's not easy to do that because it gets tired very easily. And the basal ganglia, which is the part of the brain that's recorded your repetitious behaviors, can easily overpower it. So Stephen Guise, who's the author of Many Habits, says making the right decision is in fact a huge energy drain. When we might find it easy enough to resist the tub of ice cream in the freezer for most hours of the day, chances are that your prefrontal cortex will give up once it's gotten tired. At this point, your basal ganglia will take over and you'll suddenly find yourself holding a big bowl of cookies and ice cream again. And again, usually at the end of the day when your prefrontal cortex has gotten tired. So just for what it's worth, there's a reason why it's hard to create new habits and easy to fall into old habits. And if a lot of those old habits are not good habits, don't be so hard on yourself because the brain is really set up for us to not have a lot of impulse control once we get tired. So especially think about, this pandemic, we're all under stress. Life is stressful. And unfortunately, when life is stressful and our brains get tired, it's pretty hard to tap into the willpower to make good decisions. So, we want to harness that as a way to create good habits. But believe me, we all know that there's quite a few of them already wired in our brains that are not such good habits. So both Fogg and Guise, who have written these two books, agree that motivation and willpower are very unreliable tools for real change. Guise wrote, motivation is unreliable because it's based on how you feel. And we've known for centuries that human feelings are fluid and unpredictable. Fogg, who wrote the book on tiny habits, says many of us believe that if we fail to be more productive, lose weight, or exercise regularly, that something must be wrong with us. If only we were better people, we wouldn't have failed. If only we had followed that program to the letter or kept those promises to ourselves, we would have succeeded. We just need to get our act together and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and do better, right? Nope, sorry, not right. We are not the problem. Our approach to change is. It's a design flaw, not a personal flaw. So what Guise is trying to say is, that's actually Fogg is trying to say is that, the failure to make the kind of changes that we want to make is not personal weakness. It's a design flaw because we're trying to make changes in ways that are doomed to failure. So that's the whole point of trying to change the way you try to make changes, because the reality is it's very hard to override the prefrontal to tap into the prefrontal cortex and always make good choices. It's very hard. And there's a reason why people fail. Last month we talked about how 97% of diets fail and why it's so foolish to continually try to approach the whole issue of weight by only insisting on people going on diets, because 97% of the time they fail. So they don't work, and they don't work probably for some of the same reasons we're talking about today. So this is really an attempt to talk about what can work. And what he's really saying is the problem with making changes is not a personal flaw. It's a design flaw. We're trying to make changes in ways that are doomed to fail, in part because of the way our brains are wired. So that should also remove some of the stigma. You don't have a lot of control over how your brain is wired. He suggests that a process, and this is in quotes, doesn't require you to rely on willpower or set up accountability measures or promise yourself rewards. These approaches aren't based on the way habits really work, and as a result, they aren't reliable methods for change, and they often make you feel bad because, of course, you don't succeed. Guise goes on to argue that he says willpower is more reliable than motivation, but also he acknowledges it becomes depleted very easily. He and others, and there's other research in the handout, have identified 5 sources of depletion of our motivation. They are the amount of efforts that is required, the perceived difficulty of it, negative feelings like, we're sad, mad, unhappy that we can't do something we really want to do, subjective fatigue, meaning we just get tired, and low blood sugar. So it turns out that when you're really trying to do something hard, your blood sugar drops. His mini habits are an attempt to get around all of those 5 obstacles. So he says mini habits have minimal perceived difficulty because they're designed to be very easy. They don't cause a significant amount of unpleasant feelings because the commitment is relatively small. They don't cause they cause a minimal amount of subjective fatigue, and because success is easy, they may actually increase energy. So they don't take a lot of energy to perform, so that makes that obstacle get out of the way, and they actually may give you energy for doing other things. And while blood sugar levels really are kind of independent of many habits, the fact that they are energy efficient, willpower efficient, and empowering psychologically means that they probably will preserve blood sugar as much as any other goal or habit or strategy could. So they're not going to deplete your blood sugar, but they may actually, that's the point he's really making with the mini habits, that they are willpower efficient, energy efficient, and they're empowering. And that's part of why they can be successful. So I'm alluding to tiny or mini habits. And I know when I'm reading something like this, I'm like, well, what does a mini habit look like? Give me some idea what you're really talking about. They sound like just what they are. They are steps or changes geared toward larger goals that you want to achieve, but it breaks them down into very small, very specific steps. And they really need to be very specific, not vague. Because they have to be something you'll do regularly. They have to be done with so little effort and time that you can do them every single day. So there's no excuse for not doing them. He goes on to say they have to be stupidly small. He said, my rule of thumb is to minify my desired habit until it sounds stupid. When something sounds stupidly small, your brain sees it as non-threatening. And it's easier to carry out. So here's an example, from, he has a web page that's minihabits.com, and on there he's got a list of ideas from ideas for mini habits. I also found quite a few ideas online. So for example, you want to learn more, learn one fact a day, do one mental exercise or something for 5 minutes a day, like a puzzle or a word exercise or a crossword puzzle or a brain game. There's wonderful web pages with brain games. Lumosity is one of them. There's also something called Brain HQ. Again, these links are in your handout. So you're going to do one, like if you're wanting to keep your mind sharper, do something for 5 minutes. You want to learn a foreign language, start by learning one word a day from that language. He started by doing I think it was one sit-up or one push-up a day, and it grew obviously, but he started with one push-up. Walk for 5 minutes, or if that's too much, walk to the end of your driveway and turn around and come back. Just get started with something. That's the idea. Dance to one song if you're wanting to get more exercise. Leave your house once a day, even if it's just to go down the mailbox, get your mail, and come back. If you're finding that you're isolating yourself, start small like that. Go up and down your staircase one time, or around the perimeter of your house one time. Drink one glass of water or half a glass of water if you're trying to increase the amount of water you eat every day. Eat one piece of fruit or one serving of a vegetable, or add one lettuce leaf to a sandwich. That's a mini habit. Do 3 small deep breaths. Say you want to start meditating more. Breathe in slowly 3 times. That's the kind of habit that you can do like every time you go to the bathroom. There are so many habits that they're so simple you want to repeat them in the course of a day, you can do it that way, or you can just commit to doing it once a day. But that's something you can tie. I'll talk about cues and how to time these things. Just stretch one part of your body, or do some kind of stretching for 30 seconds or a minute. Floss one tooth. He really talks about starting with flossing one tooth. Sit still and do nothing for 1 minute. If you want to learn how to relax, sit still for 1 minute. Stand outside in the sun for 1 minute if you're trying to get yourself out more. Write down one thing you're grateful for in the course of a day. Write down one positive thought in the course of a day. Connect with one friend. Savor one bite of food. Compliment one person a day, and that could even be yourself. Smile once in the course of a day. Organize paperwork for 1 minute or 5 minutes. Pick up one item that you want to give away or throw away or recycle a day. That's one I'm going to start working on. Clean your bathroom or some other area of your house you want to get clean for 1 minute or 5 minutes. Once a day, you pick it. Practice a hobby you want to start doing. Practice it for 1 minute. Meditate for 1 minute. Think one positive thought about yourself or your life a day. Add one thing to a list of new things you want to try. So if you want to get yourself out more and try new things, all you have to do is to add one thing to your list of things you'd like to try, when you get ready to do that, because you're just starting with this. And write one sentence in a journal or journal for 1 minute or 5 minutes. I like this idea. Keep a tray of sort of art supplies available to you and use them for 1 minute or 5 minutes every day just to do anything. Spend 1 minute planning for an upcoming event, a trip or a project, something you want to tackle that's more long term. Just spend a minute every day or 5 minutes if you really feel like you want to spend 5 minutes doing some planning about that event. Do something fun, like watch something funny on television or on YouTube, or read a funny book. Sing your favorite song out loud, dance with abandon, call a friend who makes you laugh, and do it for 1 minute every day or 5. Say no to one thing you don't want to do. Say yes to one thing you do want to do. Be curious about one thing and decide you'll read about it for 1 minute online or read a book about it. So these are the kind of tiny habits he's talking about. You want to pick something very small that you really can do, and you can do it every single day. Now, Fogg has a more elaborate kind of scheme for how to identify what he calls your golden behaviors, the behaviors you really want to change and you're likely to do on a regular basis. So if you're the kind of person that likes a sort of system for doing that, you can use his system. So he starts with what he calls magic wanding, which really just involves brainstorming ideas for how you might reach a desired aspiration or goal. So he has something, it's in your handout, but basically in the center of the page, you put what your desired goal is. So say it's stress reduction, and then all around it, you just put boxes, and you fill in the boxes all the possible ways in which you could reduce stress. And he calls this creating a swarm of ideas. People create terms so they can publish a book, but really you're just brainstorming. Now he has this graphic, like I said, in the center you're going to write, here's the goal I have, and all around it, all the different ways in which you could reach that goal. So, for example, if your desire would be to reduce stress, the things in the boxes around it, all the different ways you might achieve that are things like get a massage once a week, move to Hawaii, get a dog, adopt a dog, walk in nature, listen to relaxing music, ride a bike, don't look at your phone or email for 3 hours, give yourself extra time in the morning so you're not rushing to get ready for your day. So those are the swarm of ideas, all the different ways in which you could move toward that goal. Then he suggests you can do something he calls focus mapping for your golden behaviors, the behaviors that would be best for you. It's essentially looking at which behaviors are ones that you're likely to do, and also the ones which are likely to actually move you toward the goals that you have in mind. So he basically takes a sheet of paper and he divides it into quarters. So this line across here, over here is no, I'm not really likely to get I'm not really likely to do this behavior. Over here on this end of the line is, yeah, that's something I think I could do for myself. So draw a line. Then there's an up and down line, and at the top of this the line is, these are the things that would really help me reduce stress. Here are the things that are not as likely to help me reduce stress. So then he says, put all your different ideas, like the 10 ideas you come up with, on cards. And so then you sort them by, things that I think will really help me reduce stress, and you put them above the line, and things that I don't think will be as helpful for reducing stress, put them below the line. Then you're going to take this upper section of things that are likely to help you reduce stress, and you're going to separate them by, well, how likely is it I would really do this on a regular basis versus, if I'm likely to do it, then I put it over here. So you're going to end up with this quadrant over here. And I know if you don't have the handout, maybe it's hard to visualize, but basically you're going to end up with a quadrant where it's a behavior that you think you could really do on a regular basis, and it's a behavior that you think would start moving you toward your goal of, say, reducing stress. So that's how you identify sort of the best behaviors to start with. Like I said, I think it's just a way to kind of organize your thoughts. And for many of us who really find it helpful to do things like that, I think it's, it can be a helpful way to sort of just sort out and identify the things that will be things you can really do and things that really would move you toward being experiencing less stress. He thinks this makes your efforts to change feel a little less overwhelming. And it's a more systemic approach, or systematic approach. So if that appeals to you, that could be something you can do. And again, I do have the graphic on how you do that in the handout. And if you don't have the handout, reach out to me. Now, guys who wrote the other book would kind of question how realistically we can assess something we're likely to do or less likely to do, like how well we can really motivate ourselves to do something. He says we tend to overestimate our ability to motivate ourselves on a regular basis, and so he doesn't think that's always so helpful. But Fogg addresses that by, to some degree, by emphasizing the need to start still with tiny habits. We're not talking big habits. He still wants you to start tiny, because tiny is a way to mitigate the sort of unpredictability of your motivation. So he's still got the same basic message. Find a behavior you can engage in consistently, because the key to a behavior becoming a habit is that you do it regularly. And so the simpler, the better. It really has to be something that you can do on a regular basis. He said you can make a habit. So say you want to reduce stress and you're thinking, well, I need to meditate. He said the way you can make that I want to meditate into a doable behavior is by two ways. Either start by picking out a first step that would move you toward meditation, or find a way to scale back that bigger goal. So a starter step is just what it sounds like. What is one small thing you can do to move towards your goal? For example, you want to go out walking. A starter goal would be that you simply put your walking shoes on every single day. Now, it's quite possible, Fogg writes, that putting those shoes on will shift your perspective. Walking suddenly doesn't seem so hard. Most days you'll head out the door and take a spin around the block. But he's very cautious, and this is a very important part of this message today. You know, don't raise your expectation bar. Don't raise that expectation bar, especially prematurely. All you have to do is put on your walking shoes every day. Whether you go outside and walk or not is irrelevant. Just start by putting on your shoes every single day. And if that's your goal, you will always achieve success. If you decide you want to go out and go for 5 minutes, fine, you can do that. But the idea is to take a bigger goal, break it down into like, what's the first step? What's the first thing I would have to do? And if it's put on my shoes to go out for a walk, you do that every day. You just put on your shoes, you can take them back off again. But the idea is just to take that first step in the right direction. A second suggestion on how to make the behavior tiny is scale it back. So, for example, he says this means taking the behavior you want and shrinking it. If your desired behavior is to walk a mile every day, you can scale that back by walking just to your mailbox. So his examples of tiny habits are, for example, purchasing. Maybe what you want to do is you want to start eating blueberries as a snack instead of potato chips. The first thing you would do, your first starter step, is to routinely buy blueberries. Now, the scaled back step would be to eat 2 or 3 every single day. Say you want to start meditating. Your starter step is just getting the meditation pillow out of your closet. That's your starter step. The scaling back step could be meditating for 3 breaths, just sitting still and taking 3 slow, deep breaths. That's a scaled back version of I want to learn how to meditate. So you can do a starter step, you can do a scaled back version, but do something that you really can get yourself to do. And so, for example, if your goal is to drink more water, I know that's something I need to do. He says, you know, your starter step is every night before you go to bed, you fill up a bottle with ice and water and you put it in the fridge so that it's really easy when you get up the next day, you want to have some water, there it is. His scaled back version would be you take a few sips of it. You don't have to drink the whole thing. So again, that's the way to make the habit small enough that you can consistently do it on a regular basis. I found other ideas online of mini habits, and there's some in his book. Jotting down everything that's on your mind for a few minutes before you go to bed at the end of the night. So if one of your goals is to reduce stress, taking 5 minutes or even 1 minute to write down things that are on your mind before you go to bed would be a step toward reducing your stress or improving your sleeping habits, because all that stuff in our heads needs to kind of get out. That's a starter step, right? For 1 minute before you go to bed. One other suggestion would be come up with a personal mantra that you use whenever you're feeling stressed out. It could be something like, this too shall pass, I am stronger than this, I'm not alone. Something simple so that when you notice your stress level starting to escalate, you just stop and for 1 second you just say, I'm going to be okay. Or, you know, something very simple that you can do. Create a personal mantra that you're going to repeat on a regular basis. Calling, texting, email one family or friend on a regular basis if you're feeling like you want to get more connected with people. And a way to start might be think of somebody you want to write to. Somebody you want to send an email to, and just make a list of people you're going to do that for. That's your starter step. You could scale it back by saying, I'm going to write a few things that I could write in an email. Just want you to know I'm thinking of you. You're often in my thoughts. Hope all is well. Don't even have to send it yet, but start with something small. If you're wanting to get more connected, that's one of those things. One of the ideas they had was walk around your neighborhood with a trash bag and pick up litter. If you want to start feeling like you're of greater community service, if that's one of your goals. I like this idea. Do a gratitude snooze. What that means is instead of hitting the snooze button when you wake up in the morning, you sit up and you take time to think of maybe one or two things that you're grateful for. They can be little things, they can be big things, but instead of hitting the snooze button, you do a gratitude snooze and you think of one or two things you're grateful for in your life. It is actually, I've done a whole talk on gratitude, and you'd be surprised the psychological and other physical well-being that comes out of gratitude. Eat one food mindfully. If you want to be more attentive to how you're eating and whether you're really enjoying your food, pick one thing you eat during the course of your day and eat that mindfully, just meaning pay attention to it, eat it slowly, enjoy it, savor it. I like this idea. They call it the doorway drill. Every time you walk through a door, you straighten yourself up, you smile, and you hold your head up high. So every time you go through a door, you just automatically do that. He says by doing this, you'll train yourself to enter rooms with a magnetic kind of confidence. So if you want to build your self-esteem, you want to feel more confident, every time you go through a doorway, stand up straight, put your head up, put on a big smile. It's a very simple thing to do, but it trains you to be prepared to walk into rooms feeling more and looking more confident. Complete the hardest task of your day first before you do anything else. That's one way to, if you're really feeling like you're not getting stuff done that you want to get done. I don't think that's necessarily an easy habit, so it could start with, I'm just going to identify at the start of my day what would be the hardest thing to do today. Not making yourself do it, but just identifying it. That could be a scaled back version. Could be, I'm going to identify it. I'm going to think if is there one way I could do a little bit of it. So again, you're trying to find small ways to move towards your bigger goals. If you're getting too many emails, every time you get on and check your emails, unsubscribe from those emails you get that you really don't want. Other ideas were just make your bed. For some people, just making their bed feels like it starts their day in a better way. Track your finances. This was an interesting one. Ask open-ended questions. This is safe for somebody who wants to, if you're wanting to improve your ability to communicate with others and get connected with others. This comes from Connie Stemmel. It's in an article, it's on your handout, 40 small habits that can have a big impact. She wrote, improve your conversations by asking questions beyond those that solicit a simple yes or no answer. Ask for other people's opinions about events and keep your perspective open to hearing what they have to say. Learning about what other people think can help you develop empathy and put your own life and experiences into perspective. And I would say strengthen people's comfort with you. And, if you feel like you don't have enough friends or people don't notice you or you're not forming the connections you want to, that's the kind of simple thing that if you've made sort of a habit, would start to improve your conversations with people. Now, it can't be just that you ask about them. You have to share about yourself too, but that's another talk. Now, you're kind of wondering probably at this point, like, how can something so simple lead to some significant or important changes in my life? Well, two things to keep in mind. Something that is repeated every day is going to lay down new neural pathways, and it's going to stimulate other parts of the brain like the basal ganglia that help that behavior become a habit. And it'll become something that's so automatic that it requires little decision making. And that's what you want it to do. You want it to become a habit. And even if it's only a small part of moving towards your larger goal, it is a habit that is setting you up to then expand and move toward that goal. Because in time, you probably will expand that habit. I'm not going to go into this in detail now. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. But Guy says, you can always do bonus reps. Reps means repetition. So you can always do more of it if you really want to. But you have to add, really, this is an important caveat. You must only do things if you want to do them more. Never create an expectation or consider yourself having failed if you don't do more. You will succeed by doing even one little thing because you are preparing your brain to develop a habit that you really want to do. Trent Ham, in an article called that was entitled Doing Something is Always Better Than Doing Nothing, recalled something his father said to him when he was a kid. They were watching something on television. It was a show about people who do ultra marathons, like they run 100 miles or more in a single run. And he said, I had some comment about how I thought such a thing was impossible. He just looked at me sideways, this is his father, and said, if you run around the garden and back and do it a couple of times a day for a year, you'll run 100 miles. If you just stand there and say it can't be done, you'll run 0 miles. So that's kind of the idea. Start small, and at least by the end of the year, you'll run 100 miles, and maybe you'll start liking running. But anyhow, so why are mini habits or tiny habits better for making lasting change? Kind of alluded to this. It's already mentioned small habits are more likely to lead to changes that become essentially more achievable. And because you can do them consistently, they're more likely to create those neural pathways that lead to habits that become so routine they go on automatic pilot, like brushing your teeth. They also circumvent problems with willpower and motivation, and they're really the most efficient investment for your limited willpower. Guys writes, many habits also get you moving, and once you're in motion, you'll need less willpower to continue. As Newton's first law states, an object in motion will not change its velocity unless an external force acts upon it. In other words, the greatest hurdle we face is the first one, going from inertia to mobility. With a mini habit that helps you start small, you can be sure that you'll start smoothly. So you'll overcome the biggest part of changing our behaviors, which is to get started. Small achievable goals also enhance your self-esteem. They create a feeling of success, all of which only helps in terms of making changes, because the opposite is what happens most of the time. We set a very high goal, we don't meet it, and then we feel terrible about ourselves, and that reinforcing of self-hatred makes us even more stuck. I'm telling you in no uncertain terms that if you want to change anything in your life, you must come from a place of self-love and self-acceptance. And that means knowing that everybody else finds this hard to do. It is hard to do, and don't beat yourself up. Beating yourself up never helps. It never helps. It creates feelings of shame, low self-esteem. It always backfires and paralyzes us. So small achievable goals have the opposite effect. They snowball in the right direction. You start to feel you at least get started. You feel good that at least you got started. You end every day having said, well, I did achieve my mini goal today, and you feel better about yourself. And that will be a better impetus for change than self-flagellation any day. Fogg writes, thankfully, many habits provide you with a unique opportunity to experience success rather than failure several times a day. Go big or go home fails most of the time. Tiny and consistent will yield much higher success rates. Small habits can be done easily, they're more likely to be repeated, and it is in repetition that behavior becomes habit. Fogg says tiny habits are powerful because tiny is fast, they can start now, they're safe, they're not threatening to us, they can grow big, they reduce dependence on willpower and motivation, and they're transformative. So how do you utilize this concept of small habits? Well, both Fogg and Guy say that in order for us to really repeat a behavior, we have to create a cue that makes us remember to do that behavior. So they say after you identify that habit you want to change and you create a mini habit that's moving you in the right direction, link it to a reward and a cue. So a cue that reminds you to do it and a reward after you do it. So Guy says after you come up with a list of your mini habits, he also says go through this and ask yourself why do I want to do this? He said you want to drill down to really understand your motivation for this particular habit you want to change. And mostly he thinks you should do that because he wants you to be clear that your motivation for changing is coming from you and not some belief that's based in pleasing other people. So he just says, look at that mini habit and just really make sure you're doing it for yourself and not because you are doing it to please other people, because he doesn't think you should do things to please other people. This has to really come from something you want to do. Fogg suggests looking at what obstacles you might encounter in kind of trying to do your daily habit and making sure the habit is easy enough that you really can complete it and get past those obstacles. Things which are easy get done, and consistency is what you're going here for. That's what you're going for. You're trying to consistently do something every day that moves you in the right direction. Next, you need to tie that behavior to a cue, which is just something that reminds you to do it, because he says no behavior really happens without a prompt. So it can be a time-based cue, such as at noon, I'm gonna, go out, I'm gonna walk into my mailbox and back. It can be when you first get up in the morning or any time you want to select, but it's tied to a particular time of the day. It can also be activity-based, such as after I eat my first meal, or after I have my last bite of lunch, or every time you flush the toilet. You do a deep breath, for example. Each has its benefits and its drawbacks. Time-based cues are more rigid, but they're also clear-cut. I find that I think I really have to attach it to a time, because if I keep thinking, well, I'll get to it, you know what happens. You're at the end of your day, you're tired. Now, again, if it's a mini habit, you should still be able to do it. But it's probably better for some of us who need structure to have it timed to a particular time. Now, the ones that are more activity-based, they're more flexible, but sometimes you're not as sure exactly when you're supposed to do it. You can also give yourself the freedom to fit it into your schedule however it would make sense that day. If you don't have the same kind of schedule every day, maybe the same time every day doesn't make sense. So you can play with that, but there's no right or wrong way, but you just want to ensure that you remember to do it, and then make it, have that experience of success. And so when you tie it to a cue that reminds you to do it, because think about it, whenever you brush your teeth at night, there's probably a cue. You're like, okay, I've turned off the television. I'm going to go to bed. I always go brush my teeth then. So, you want to just tie it to something to remind yourself to do it every single day. Fogg says that we actually react to hundreds of prompts every day, and we act without even noticing it. The light turns green, you drive your car, you hit the gas pedal. You feel a raindrop, you open up an umbrella. So we have prompts throughout our day that always trigger behaviors. We're just not so aware of them because they're habits. Fogg also talks about people prompts. That means for him, things from within you that would prompt you, for example, feeling hungry, but the problem is unless it's a prompt that you experience every day, you may not be able to draw on it as easily. He talks about context prompts. He means things like setting a reminder on your phone. I think that's a really good one. Or putting a note on your mirror that you see every morning, or on your toothbrush that you pick up every morning, but tie it to something that will remind you to do it. He also talks about action prompts. He says, link a prompt to an activity you're already doing routinely. He calls this an anchor prompt because it's tied to something you do routinely. So if you brush your teeth every morning, it could be after I brush my teeth, I will do X. And he says it's a good idea, for example, to match either the physical location or the theme to the prompt because you're more likely to remember it. So after I brush my teeth, I'm going to sit down in the bathroom on the toilet and I'm going to breathe deeply for 1 minute. Or if I'm going to after I throw away something, after I throw away what's left after I eat my lunch, I'll go around the house and pick one thing I'm going to either donate or give away or recycle or put back in its proper place. So that prompt is tied to, I just threw out my lunch garbage. Now I need to go throw something else out. So you can tie it to something that have similar themes. Again, it's really just to find a way to make a prompt that really will work for you and that you'll remember. Other examples are after my feet hit the ground in the morning, I'm going to XYZ. After I turn off my alarm, after I make my bed, after I pour my first cup of coffee, it could be I'll open my journal and write for 1 minute. After I eat my last bite of lunch, I'll go pick something to give away. After I walk my dog at night, I'm going to whatever. After I wash the dishes. But again, you want something simple. Now, if it's something you want to do a couple of times a day, for example, 1 deep breath or 3 deep breaths, because you're really trying to train your body to relax, you can do it after you flush the toilet. I'm telling you, I would really be well geared toward meditation if I did it after I flush the toilet every day. Or say you want to repeat a self-loving message. For example, you're trying to change that tape in your head that always points out everything you do wrong and never notices the things you do right. So every time, say you flush the toilet, you could say, I may not be perfect, but I'm perfectly fine. It could be something, just a self-affirming message to try changing the tape in your head. The final step in all of this is just to reward yourself in some way. Again, it doesn't have to be something big. It shouldn't be, sit down and eat a big meal, but it can be as simple as a fist pump or saying like, good for me, I did it, or looking in your mirror and smiling at yourself, or allowing yourself 15 minutes to like read a book or do something pleasurable like read a magazine, patting yourself on the back, just something that's telling your brain, this is good, this is good. Calling a friend or calling someone who understands what you're trying to do. Putting a quarter every time you do your habit, you reward yourself by putting a quarter in a jar that's labeled just for me. So, whenever you decide to cash in your corners, you can buy something or do something with that money that's just for you. Have a small piece of candy, something that reinforces in the brain that that's a good thing. For example, what Fogg is saying is that emotion creates habits. Research suggests that 90% of our decision making is based on emotion. And here's a good example of that. They were giving doctors a task to perform that had to do with coming up with a diagnosis with a more complex set of symptoms. They gave one set of doctors a box of chocolates. Before they didn't get to eat them because they didn't want the glucose to affect it. They just gave them a box of chocolates they could take home after this exercise, and the other half didn't get any chocolate. Well, guess what? The guys who were given a box of chocolates to take home, or women, because obviously they're female doctors, the doctors that got that box of chocolate not only performed the task faster but more effectively, meaning they were more likely to catch on to the fact that this was actually a complicated diagnosis as opposed to one that would have been simple and default to. So just anticipatory happiness made people more effective, those doctors. So Fogg suggests we celebrate our accomplishments right after they happen in order to take advantage of the brain's kind of reward system. He said, when you find a celebration that works for you and you do it immediately after a new behavior, your brain repatterns to make that behavior more automatic in the future. So I was thinking earlier, like if I really wanted to change a behavior, all I would have to do is do the behavior and then give my dog a reward, because I'm going to tell you then at every, so say 3 o'clock, I went outside and walked to my mailbox and walked back, and I gave my dog a reward after I did that. I'm telling you, every day at 3 o'clock, she would be dragging me to the door to go out to the mailbox, because dogs develop habits very instantly when they're rewarded for them. And guess what? We're not all that different. So some suggestions for celebrations could be humming an upbeat song like the theme to Rocky, or imagining the roar of the crowd as you accomplish your goals, or seeing fireworks, looking up and making a V for victory with your arms, smirking and telling yourself, I got this. Just something very simple. Even if the reward is silly, it's important for 3 reasons. It works, and it probably works because it releases dopamine in the reward center of our brain. So we then associate that behavior with a positive experience, and our brain uses dopamine to make us feel good after we do something. So if we reward ourselves, dopamine is released, and so our brain then associates that behavior with a pleasant feeling. It's a skill worth learning, and learning to ignore self-criticism and feel good about your successes, will ripple out into your life in general. He says, if celebrating the small stuff is hard for you to do, the go big or go home mentality is probably sneaking up on you. Shut it down. It's a trap. Celebrate a win no matter how tiny, and that will quickly lead to more wins. Think of all those times you could have changed but didn't. And here you are now 2 squats in and you're changing. Another tip from guys is to write it down. Research suggests that the things that we write down have a more prominent place in our brain and our mind. So he suggests tracking your mini habits on a big calendar. That's his technique. He talks about Jerry Seinfeld, who would mark his calendar with a big X every day if he completed the task of writing jokes. So he had some kind of joke writing task that he did every day. And he told a young comedian how this helped. He said, after a few days, you have a chain. So you've got all these X's, you have a chain. Just keep at it and the chain will grow longer every day. You'll like seeing that chain, especially when you get a few weeks under your belt. Your only job now then is to not break the chain. So he used sort of that visual guide and writing it down every day as a way to really create the desire to keep the chain going. So how do these small habits then lead to more significant change? And this is, I'm going to talk about the article that I read called How I Finally Got Myself to Start Exercising by Christine Carter. And it was about running for just 1 minute every day. She felt like she should take advantage of the pandemic to get back into running, as already mentioned, and so she immediately decided she should train for a half marathon. She set up a very demanding schedule, and within 2 weeks she had totally stopped exercising. So she concluded that the ability to follow through on good intentions doesn't depend on the reasons we do them or the depth of our convictions, or on our knowledge of how much benefit they yield, or the strength of our willpower. Instead, she says, it depends on our willingness to be bad at our desired behavior. And she said, and I hate being bad at stuff. I'm a go big or go home kind of gal. I like being good at things, and I quit exercising because I wasn't willing to be bad at it. To establish an exercise routine, I needed to let myself be bad at it. I needed to stop trying to be an actual athlete. I started exercising again by running for only 1 minute at a time. Yes, that's right, just 60 seconds. She felt a better than nothing habit is easy to repeat and will eventually go on autopilot. And as we just explained, that's exactly how the brain works. This is what she wrote. Once you start acting on autopilot, that's the golden moment that your habit can begin to expand organically. After a few days of running for just 1 minute, I started feeling a genuine desire to keep running. Not because I felt like I should exercise more or I had to impress people, but because it actually felt more natural to keep running than it felt to stop. She warns, however, overachievers not to become tempted to set a new expectation of themselves. She said, the moment we feel we should do more, we risk losing our gains. She said the moment we feel we should do more, we get ourselves into trouble. Running more because you genuinely want to, and it's easy and it is enjoyable and fine, that's good. That's when you want to keep running. But making yourself do it more will sabotage you. She said we have to be willing to accept that motivation comes and goes, and when you have days when you really don't want to do more, you'd have to listen to that. Because that's the Achilles heel. If you go from I only have to run from a minute to, well, I ran 15 minutes yesterday, so I think I should run 15. The minute you do that, you're sabotaging yourself. She said on those days, doing some wildly unambitious act is better than doing nothing. A 1-minute meditation is relaxing and restful. A single leaf of romaine lettuce has a half a gram of fiber and important nutrients. A 1-minute walk gets you outside and moving, which is what our bodies really need. Finally, she writes, it turns out that to grow as people, we need only do something minuscule. When we abandon our grand plans and great ambition in favor of taking the first teeny tiny steps, we shift. And paradoxically, it is in that tiny shift that our grand plans and great ambitions are truly born. Guy says it's always okay to do more repetitions, bonus reps as he calls it. But he goes on to say, whenever I do any mini habit, I almost always do more. And by almost, I mean well over 90% of the time. And by more, I mean a lot more. Lay's potato chip has the famous slogan, you can't eat just one. Well, I bet you can't just do one push-up. That was his goal, or write a few words. Once you start, you're going to want to do more. At that point, it's easy to continue. It's just as easy to continue as it is to stop. But what if you don't continue? What if you only meet the minimum requirement every single day? Is all hope lost? No, not at all. If you only meet the small requirement, it will still become a habit, and relatively quickly based on its small size. Once it is it's a habit, you're in a perfect position to build upon it. I mean that literally. The perfect foundation for doing more of something is having an existing habit of that behavior. At some point, that spark is going to become a small flame, and later we'll all be roasting marshmallows over that giant bonfire telling stories of lore. But he warns, and this is important to pay attention to this, he warns not to turn that desire to do more into an obligation that takes on all the pressure and weight of goals that typically fail. He says it's vitally important to remind yourself that your daily goal has not changed. Your goal is to run for 1 minute. Your goal is to take three deep breaths. Your goal is to meditate for 1 minute. Don't change that. If you choose to do more, fine, but know every day when you get up, all you have to do is that 1 minute. And this is how he concludes. Instead of high expectations for quantity of work, we're going to place our expectations and energy on consistency. Life's most powerful tool is consistency, because that's the only way for behaviors to become habits. And when a non-habit becomes a habit, it literally means that you've gone from fighting against your brain to joining forces with it. So that's the whole idea. Join forces with your brain by starting with small, achievable, doable habits. If in the course of your day you want to do more, that's fine, but just make sure you're not turning it into a should. And maybe for a month you don't even do any, you never want to do it. But at some point you probably will organically want to do more. But you'll be doing it from a place of like, well, I'm kind of enjoying this. I'm going to do a little bit more, not a should. So you're not shoulding on yourself. You're not saying I have to. Oh, I did it for 15 minutes yesterday. Now I got to do it for 15 minutes. No. That will defeat you. The goal is to have a tiny habit that you do every single day consistently and lay down those neural pathways. And at times when you want to do more, it grows organically because you want to do it, not because you should do it. You will do, and you can do more. But you always have permission at the end of every day, or at the beginning of every day, to just do the initial small goal. So that's, you're sort of having to trick your brain, and trick that inner critic who's like, well, you should do more. The idea is to do something repetitiously enough that it really becomes a daily part of your brain. You do it without even thinking, and naturally you start to grow and do more of it. But even if you don't do more of it for a long time, you are still moving in the right direction. So that's my presentation. I know it's not typically how we talk about changing behavior, which is exactly why I wanted to present it because the way we typically try to change behavior turns out isn't very successful. It doesn't really work very well for people. So this is a way to have success. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you don't have the handout, please feel free to reach out to me.
Dr. Judy, we have some questions here.
Oh, sure. Let's hear the questions.
Okay. First one's from Anonymous. Hi, Dr. Judy P. Love Melissa.
Okay.
We got another Anonymous here. So many bad habits. Thank you for helping us to find helpful ways to handle these. Some of us have many. Ugh.
Yeah, welcome to the human race.
Yeah, and we have another Anonymous. So far, you make it sound possible. How do I make the commitment to get started? I guess that's the small goals you were talking about.
Right. Well, the fact that it's so small is definitely going to be something that helps. But I think you just decide tomorrow you're going to do it. Or tomorrow you identify that small habit, and then you really have to make it something that's not hard to do. You really have to make it something that you can do every single day. So keep shrinking it until it becomes something you can do every single day. So even if
Emily says great, she just said a great with an exclamation mark. So and that's it for the questions there.
All right. Well, listen, see you next month where we're going to talk about decluttering, and I'm telling you that's going to be one of my tiny habits, and maybe I'll be able to report on how successful I was at really doing that tiny habit. But I'm excited about it, and I feel like I can do it. If I had to clean my whole house out and give up everything, I'm telling you right now, I'd be paralyzed by the thought. But the idea of maybe looking around my house and picking one thing up, like I have a ton of books I'm going to give away, I can do that. So we'll talk next month about decluttering. And again, if you want to get a copy of the handout and you don't have it, write to me. My name is Judith Pierson, all small letters, Judith. There it is. Terrence was able to put it up on the screen. That's my email address. You can also write to Sandra Satterfield at Delaware Hospice. She's got copies of all my handouts. And if this is a talk you want other people to see, we are recording it, and we will get that link out to you so you can pass it on to other people. And if you have the handout and you think it'd be helpful to give it to anybody, give it to anybody you want. I just wanted to get out there. So I'm not possessive of it. I really want you to share it with anybody you want to. All right. Thank you all for coming. Namaste, and I will see you next month. All right, bye-bye.